Welcome everyone to another Tech 90. I think we got a good show for you planned today. Myself, Greg Brunts, National Technical Support Specialist for GREE. And we also have Robert. Robert, you want to chime in here and tell us what you do for GREE?
Morning, everybody. I am the GREE Commercial Specialist and Technical Advisor.
Excellent. And Jesus, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everybody. Jesus Fraga here, Commercial VRF Inside Sales, and that's what I do for GREE.
So let's get started. But first, why did we choose the topic to highlight? Why MultiPRO commercial products installation? Well, I'm going to give you my little tidbit on that, why I think we decided to do this, and I'll also let Robert kind of join in and give his little tidbit. So I've done a lot of trainings out of Atlanta. I've done Tech 90s on our MultiPRO MultiPRO single phase version that it can be used for commercial or residential even. And those trainings, I cover so much of the controls, the service tools, and all of that. And if you've been installing our MultiPRO single phase units, you're that close to already knowing a lot about doing commercial. So I felt it's important to, start getting guys a little bit of a sneak peek into what we have to offer commercially. Because a lot of it does play in very similar to our single phase MultiPRO. Robert, you got anything you want to add there?
To add to that, Greg, as more and more of the GREE footprint gets out there, it's nice for our contractors to know the little nuances that will help them have a successful startup and installation. It's a little different than some of the other brands out there, and having that information will streamline the process.
And Robert, you're absolutely right, because in this video we do cover that. We cover the basics that you need to know to install one of these and install it successfully. Doesn't mean you still shouldn't read the user's manual that comes with it to get a little more abreast with it, understanding the proper installation procedures to the mode boxes and stuff like that if you're doing a heat recovery. But at least you're going to get a little glimpse into what it takes to do commercial units. So I think with that, let's just get on and play that first video, and we'll come back and answer questions. I've done a whole bunch of trainings down here with MultiPRO. And with the MultiPRO equipment, that's single phase. You can be used in a residential application. It can be used in a commercial application. We have all the way up to 5-ton equipment. We have 3, 4, and 5-ton ultra equipment. Quite an offering of indoor units as far as cassettes and air handlers and wall mounts and floor ceiling units and ducted units. I mean, the list goes on quite a ways. But I thought it would be important to share today that a lot of what you guys, if you've joined those broadcasts before, what you learned in that MultiPRO line of equipment is shared in the VRF world of equipment. So a lot of your indoor units are going to be exactly the same. Your controls are going to be exactly the same. In other words, our wired controllers that we use on these units, the remote controls we use on these units, even some of the like cool automation, that stuff is shared across the two product lines as well. The other biggie is the portable service tool. The portable service tool that I've broadcasted down here quite a few times, connecting to our MultiPRO single phase equipment, is the same portable service tool that I can go to a commercial 3-phase unit and plug it up to that machine and do the same test and procedures on that. So whether you knew it or not, when you're paying attention to MultiPRO and looking at that, especially in the residential market, I've talked about it many times, I've got a 4-ton MultiPRO Ultra single phase installed on my house with 3 wall mounts and an air handler. In the application for residential or even like commercial, our single phase equipment up to 5 ton, the one thing we can't offer there is heat recovery. So when you step up into commercial and you go to 3-phase,
and we've got, Robert, is a 6-ton.
6-ton, 8-ton, 10-ton, 12-ton, and a 14-ton.
And 14-ton offerings. So in any one of those outdoor units, now we can actually install those as a heat pump or heat recovery. Okay. And what we're going to be talking about today is the GMB6 product line, which is the newest product line that GREE has to offer for three-phase, yes, for commercial 3-phase VRF and heat pump. The cool part about it is they're all the same machines, and that's what we're going to talk about today too. Is you can actually pipe and install those as a heat pump, or you can pipe it and install it as a heat recovery unit. So anyway, right off the bat, I'm just trying to share with you guys, you know, whether you think you knew anything about 3-phase or not, if you've paid attention or done some single-phase MultiPRO, you've kind of already opened your door into being able to do 3-phase commercial.
Yep.
It's just a little bit bigger unit, a little bit more platform, and more options. So I want to give you an overall what we're going to cover today. First, we're going to be covering the quick reference guide for commercial. Then from there, we're going to go into the mode boxes, and we're not going in-depth installation, but we're going to give you some of the highlights of things you need to know about mode boxes when you're doing a heat recovery unit. Then we're going to cover some highlights in the installation manual and or owner's manual. I don't know why GREE calls it an owner's manual, but it's owner's/installation manual. So when I say owner's manual, I mean installation manual. If I say installation manual, I mean owner's manual. Anyway, then lastly, we're going to kind of cover a few things in the service manual. Again, we're not going to go in depth, but we will cover some parts of the service manual.
The stuff we're going to cover in the service manual is going to save you a lot of headaches to begin with. So if you do these initial processes from the get-go, it's going to save you a lot of trouble. Yeah,
that's the whole idea here, is trying to make the job, put out the highlights as to what you really need to be mindful of when you're installing this product. So Robert made mention, we were just conversing the other day, and you know, we've talked about doing product training and stuff like that before. And people always want to know, well, what kind of air codes? You know, what about all these air codes? And if you're doing a technical training, you know, they want to know about every single air code in there that's listed, and there is a bunch of them. But Robert made mention, and I want to reiterate the fact is, okay, there is a ton of air codes, but there's a very short list of ones we actually ever really see.
Correct, yep.
So if they're installed properly, a lot of those air codes, you're never going to see them.
Yep.
But, you know, and then I tell guys all the time, it's like, okay, if you get that one that's off the wall, then, you know, that's why we have technical support. We provide technical support. We're more than happy to dig into it with you. I've done it myself. You know, we'll dig in, we'll figure it out. So anyway, with that, I'm not going to hold this up any longer. Robert, let's start with this quick reference guide and kind of go over some of the things on there.
So this quick reference guide may seem very familiar to you because it is similar to the GREE MultiPRO. The only difference with this one is that the equipment that you see on the screen here is all 3-phase. It's 233-phase, and the units are 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14 ton. And you'll also notice at the top of the page, which we got into a discussion earlier, you notice you don't see any SEER ratings on commercial equipment. You see an IEER, and you also see the SCHE rating. One of the things that I was talking with Greg about earlier is you notice on the IEER, on that 6-ton unit, it's 21.2, but yet in the simultaneous cooling and heating, it's 31. And as Greg mentioned, in a heat recovery mode, we get the extra efficiency by reusing or redirecting that heat as opposed to dispelling it into the atmosphere, correct?
Right. I mean, essentially, and I've said this for years, you know, a lot of guys get confused, or even homeowners especially get confused. They think an air conditioner makes cold air. An air conditioner does not make cold air. It moves heat. It takes heat from one space, moves it to another space. So you absorb it on the evaporator coil, you release it on the condenser coil. So in heat recovery, instead of taking that heat that you absorbed in cooling mode in one room and just dumping it outside, you may very well be, through that mode box, dumping that into another room. And one of the good examples we came up with or thinking about was like, what if you have a building that's got like a server room that's got a whole bunch of heat in it from all those servers, but the rest of the building's offices and stuff like that. Well, the service room needs cooling year round. The rest of that building, the people working in them offices, they absolutely want some heat.
Yep.
So you're taking the heat that you out of that server room to protect those servers, and you're able to transport that heat into those office spaces where people do need heat. And that's why that number jumps up so much, because you're basically just, and what I guess the simple way to say it is it's energy management. You're not wasting heat. Other applications you can think of, not so much VRF, but you know, there's a lot of HVAC systems out there now that they take heat like from one space and they dump it into the water heaters. So it's all energy management stuff, and VRF does a great job with that when you're doing a heat recovery.
So looking at those numbers, Greg, to me it looks like the best option for efficiency would use heat recovery.
It's actually the best option for efficiency, but it's also the best option for, you know, them office spaces where you got one person that's always hot, one person that's always cold, and that gives them the ability, they can have one room in cooling and one room in heating. You can't do that with heat pump. And I've had those discussions even with contractors in the field installing the single-phase MultiPRO, and they install it in a residence, and that residence has got 4 or 5 indoor units. And there's a big misconception, you know, because they think it's zoning, I can have this one on heating and that one in cooling. Well, unfortunately, we don't offer heat recovery in single phase. But in office spaces and stuff like that, we can absolutely do that. So, but one of the things, before we get too deep into it too, Robert, that I want to talk about is, you know, part of where VRF has got a bad name is because I think the jobs become too complex.
Yep.
And when you make them too complex, it makes it more difficult. So I like to compare it to like doing a Walmart, let's say, or even a big clothing store, whatever the case may be. And you walk into a lot of these buildings, you know up above you, because you see all the duct chutes coming down, you've got package unit after package unit after package unit all up on that roof. Well, okay, so let's say we've got 10 5-ton units on that roof. If one of those goes down, that whole building's not suffering. And that's where we kind of say, you know, doing 3-phase, doing tandem units and a whole bunch, and having 100 indoor units attached to, you know, piped together outdoor units, and making that whole thing one system is not always your best option. Mm-hmm. Your best option may be to do, like, let's say we needed 20 ton, we do 4 or 5 tons, you know, but obviously we don't have 5 tons in single phase, but okay, so you do 4 6 tons, right? Mm-hmm. You understand what I'm getting at?
Yep.
Split that up, so then that way, when a machine goes down, you don't lose the whole building.
Correct.
Right? And then there's a lot of redundancy to, like if you have an application where you have a server room. A lot of times they will have a system that is the primary cooling system for that server room, but they also have a backup.
Yes.
Because they can't afford the machines to go down. So you can still use 2 machines there. One machine is doing part of, you know, absorbing heat out of it and providing heat in the other part of the building. The other one's redundant, doing the same thing. So you keep both machines running. The odds of both those machines going down at once is pretty slim unless you got a power problem or something like that.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
So there's a million different ways you can look at it, but there's also a lot of small commercial applications where that 6-ton unit or even that 8-ton unit may be the ideal situation for that commercial job. And instead of using a package unit or something like that and not having all the ductwork.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. Like the example we were talking about having a training room where you have a big conference room like what we have here, and then we have 4 separate office spaces.
Right.
So this particular one could be, as you mentioned, operated off a 6-ton unit just dedicated to this side of the building where they can turn it on and off as they need it.
Right.
So it's not affecting the overall power load on the building.
Exactly.
Yep. So,
all right.
So the other thing I wanted to point out real quick, as Greg mentioned, these are our new GMV6 units. We have our standard heat pump and we have our ultra heat pump. It's also a heat recovery unit.
So use your mouse there just to, kind of highlight what you're talking about there. So there's our standards.
Standard
Heat pump or heat recovery.
And what makes it standard is the operating temperature. You see on this particular one, it goes down to -3 and up to 126. And on the Ultra, it'll go down to -22 and up to 126. These are built-in conditions set on the outdoor unit where you do not need to add any type of low ambient kit or any wind baffles to those units where you see that on some of the other manufacturers out there.
Well, there seems to be some misconception with some of that too, even in the mini split world, Flex, our MultiPRO units. We've had contractors ask, what kind of low ambient kit do I need? What do I need? You don't need anything. Those units are rated for cooling without any additional information or additional products, put it that way.
Correct.
So you got an inverter driven system. The compressor can speed up and slow down. They can also control the fan speed to keep the head pressure up when they need to. It's built into the machine.
Yep.
So
on these, again, as we mentioned, changing it on a standard heat pump or the Ultra heat pump, to change it from that to heat recovery, there is a simple dip switch that we will show you a little later in the manual where you would actually change that.
So I guess let's elaborate on that just a little bit. So heat recovery is going to be a 3-pipe system.
Correct.
Going into a mode box. From the mode box, you're going to go to your indoor units. Heat pump is going to be installed very much like a MultiPRO single-phase system, where we're going to use Y branches or a header, and we're going to just, in our wiring is just going to daisy chain. But in that application, you're only going to have 2 pipes coming from the outdoor unit, and we will branch off of, like I said, a Y branch or a header and pick up however many indoor units we're using. But the downfall to that is it's still a heat pump, so all of those units have to be in heat, or all those units have to be in cool, and you're going to have a master indoor unit. When it comes to heat recovery, you no longer have to have a master, because one unit can be heating, one unit can be cooling, and it's because it's a 3-pipe situation, and your mode box is going to allow your refrigerant flow to be able to transfer heat from one room to another room and stuff like that.
Yep.
So
the other thing that's important about the information on here, which we're going to cover again, is the outdoor dimensions. And the first figure is the actual width, and that's going to be important as we talk later about twinned outdoor units, when you need more than 12 tons. And I say 12 tons because that is the current model that we can twin up to.
okay.
The 14 ton we cannot twin.
Okay.
So the 12 you can twin.
Okay.
So, and as Greg mentioned, as we talked about it, the midsection of this particular document has the different type of indoor units, including our AHU kit, which we will briefly discuss.
Yeah, so again, I've done multiple trainings down here. If you guys have listened in any of my broadcasts regarding indoor equipment with MultiPRO, all of that is shared here. The only thing I really didn't talk much about was the AHU kits. They can be used. The AHU kit, all it really does for you is allow you to use a third-party indoor air handler. And then the AHU kit is going to come of 2 things. You're going to have your control box, and you're going to have your refrigerant flow box. And you're going to have to install all the sensors and stuff like that to make it all work. Because you're basically taking whatever metering device is in that air handler out. You're going to use the EEV that's in the AHU kit to control your refrigerant flow, and then you're going to have to install the appropriate sensors in the appropriate location. So you're going to have a return air sensor, supply air sensor, inlet coil temperature sensor, and an outlet coil temperature sensor. So that outdoor unit can talk to that AHU kit, which is making everything happen with the refrigerant flow on that air handler.
Yep.
So it's not a hard concept, but it's not as simple as using a GREE air handler, is what I'm saying. Because now you have to go in there and be part manufacturer,
yeah.
right? Mm-hmm. So anyway,
yep.
But all the rest of them, we're not going to get in depth with them because we've got into it so many times already. All of the rest of that equipment is all shared.
Yep. The other thing that we want to talk about here and highlight is the combination rules. So on our 6-ton, the maximum indoor units you can connect, we're talking about number, is up to 13. And the minimum capacity connected is 36,000 BTUs, or 50% of the rated capacity of the outdoor unit.
So I've talked about that many times with single-phase MultiPRO. Your connection ratio is 50 to 135%. If you've got, say, 3 indoor units, and one of those units goes down, as long as we maintain 50% connected capacity or higher, the other 2 units can stay functional. If we fall below that 50%, nothing runs.
See, this is what separates us from some of the other brands, because if you lose one of their indoor units, the whole system shuts down.
Right?
So, and then the other thing we're pointing out here is the maximum connected capacity. Now remember, this is a quick reference guide. It's not, and does not replace the selection software. Here it says a max of 125%. And there is that 10% difference, and we give you that 10% just in case you did not do a load calc.
We do it sparingly.
Yep, exactly. So there's some room in there.
Right.
Please don't go over it unless you have the proper documentation.
Now, the other thing I want to point out too, Robert, is back to the max indoor unit connected, okay? Be careful what you guys are doing out there. You know, a lot of people think with inverter-driven equipment, I don't have to do load calc. Yes, you do. If you are putting, just because you can zone every room, doesn't mean you should zone every room. And be careful in making sure that you're getting the right unit for the application, the right size. You know, I just talked about it in my last broadcast about MultiPRO. In what world do you put a 1-ton cassette in a 100 square foot room?
Exactly.
You just don't. There's no applications out there, unless it's a server room maybe, that you're going to have enough heat load, heat gain to need a 1-ton cassette in a little bitty 10 by 10 room. It's just not going to happen.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
So that's a very crude example, and people often wonder why I bring that stuff up. Trust me, I'm only having that conversation because I've had that phone call. So,
and to reiterate Greg's point here, on this particular 14-ton unit where my mouse is, it shows the maximum indoor unit is 26. That 26 doesn't mean it's all 18K indoor units.
right.
It's all based on the outdoor capacity and the combination of the indoor units.
Right.
Because you're not going to get any more than that.
Right. I said, just because you can zone it that much doesn't mean you should.
Correct.
So, all right, so let's jump into control options a little bit, just kind of briefly go over those again. So, the XK46, and if you want to highlight that for me, that is what's currently coming with our ducted units. As you will see, when Robert does one of the selection softwares, you can see that controller has been replaced by a different controller. So there is going to be another controller coming shortly instead of the XK46. Then the YAP1F wireless remote, that is what is coming with our cassettes and our wall mounts. Again, you guys can add a controller. You can switch to controllers. So we're going to move into our next line of controllers. You got the XE70. That comes with our air handler. The XE7C-24, I didn't give you guys the whole number, but you can see. But that doesn't come with anything. That's accessory. So you can order those. In my opinion, it is the nicest of the controllers. The XK46 is not a bad controller, only a lot of the settings that you got to do it is more of a P code, it's a parameter setting, versus the XE70 and XE7C, it literally tells you on the screen what you're changing, right? And I went through those controllers in multiple broadcasts before down here, so if you guys want to see some of that, you can always go to our website or to YouTube and just type in GREE Comfort, and I'm sure you'll find some of those videos I've done about those controllers and stuff down here before. Again, all of those controllers are shared with single-phase MultiPRO.
Same controller.
The central controller, so that will do up to 16 systems and 255 indoor units. And I've talked about that repeatedly down here. And we'll talk about it again when we bring up the install manual or service manual. I can't remember which one we got to bring up. But when you're doing central control, in other words, you're going to have up to 16 systems. It's very important, whether you're putting in that central control or if we're going to do Cool Master, which is coming up next. Both of those are using the same protocol to to be able to central control or control via the web all of those systems. So it means all the outdoor units and all of the indoors. When you do that, you have to make sure you set that up ahead of time. You don't have to. We can fix it, but it's more painstaking on the person installing it. It's more painstaking to get it back to where it needs to be. And if you would have just preliminarily done it ahead of time, the instructions and central controllers show it perfectly. It shows the wiring, how they have to daisy chain between the G1 and G2 on the outdoor units. You don't have to have your wiring going all the way to the indoor units yet. All you need is your daisy chain between the outdoor units. Before you power them up, you set the outdoor systems. So when I say system, if you've got 2 units piped together, now that becomes one system, and you're going to have a master and a slave, and we're going to talk more about that. You have a master and a slave, but the master's the master. And then if you have another system, which is 2 units together, that's system number 2, you only set master. System number 3, you only set master, okay? So you set those as unit 1, 2, 3. And then your daisy chain wiring between G1 and G2, between those 3, if you've already got those dip switches set, when you commission and start up those units, it's already going to automatically not duplicate addresses on your indoor units. So then when you come back and hook up that central control or cool automation, it'll automatically be able to pull all those addresses in, because these are self-addressing. It'll pull all those addresses in and you won't have a mode conflict. If you don't do that ahead of time, now we got to go back and shut everything back down, reset the dip switches, readdress everything. Now I can hook up central control. And if you just did that a couple steps ahead of time, you've been fine.
So if
Again,
you happen to see a C5 error code on your wired controller or your centralized controller, that's telling you
that's
that
exactly what that means.
you got duplicate addresses and it wasn't done properly on
And
the-
again, if you just refer to the central controller instructions, it talks about them dip switch settings and everything. Whether you're using central control or you're using cool automation, the wiring and those dip switch settings are exactly the same.
And we'll cover that
Yep.
coming up. So,
All right, and then the 24-volt adapter is the last thing that we have to offer too. And that's when you absolutely, the customer just does not like the GREE controller or the GREE remote or whatever. This gives you the ability on any of the indoor units to use whatever third-party thermostat you want to use, and that it'll take that 24-volt signal and communicate to the communicating system and tell it what to do.
the only thing with that 24-volt dry contact is you need to power it up with a 24-volt field-supplied transformer.
Transformer, correct.
Yep.
Correct. Even on the air handlers, I'm going to point that out. On the air handlers, the way even if whether you have electric heat or not, there is a transformer in there. That 24-volt transformer is used to control electric heat if electric heat is installed on a GREE air handler. They cycle the line voltage power to that transformer. So you cannot use that transformer to power the 24-volt adapter.
That's very important. I think you should repeat that.
Okay. The transformer that's in the GREE air handlers
Let me show that
is
real
for when you have which would be
Right here.
right there. The transformer that's in that air handler is used for the 24-volt output to engage electric heater. The board, when it has a signal to turn on electric heat, it is cycling the power to the transformer. So the transformer does not get line voltage power until it has a call for electric heat. Therefore, you don't have 24 volts all the time. So you cannot use that transformer to power the 24-volt adapter.
quick. If you do, you'll get a no display on that thermostat.
And I've had guys ask me, well, can't I just change the wiring and make the transformer hot all the time? A guy could. I can't condone it. The reason why I can't condone it is I can't tell you to do things to that machine that takes the way of the UL listing.
Correct. Yeah.
If you choose to do something like that, keep in mind, you're doing that on your own. I'm not telling you no, I'm not telling you yes. I'm telling you,
Yep.
you know what I mean? I'm going to give you the shoulder shrug because I can't condone it.
I hope you've enjoyed it so far. I think Robert did a great job of explaining that quick reference guide and all the meat and potatoes that's in there. Just as a quick reminder, I believe you said it in that broadcast, Robert, but I don't remember for sure. But I believe what's the? You want to give them the website real quick?
So it's greecomfort.com, and then under the distributor tab, you can go under the distributor tab and go down to GREE distributor support. And when that window opens up, there is a drop down for system documentation and literature. And it'll take you to a page where you can go to the GREE marketing literature. And then you can open that and scroll down until you see the MultiPRO commercial quick reference guide. And then you can print up that guide that we just went over.
Okay, but they can also get to it by going to greecommercial.com as well.
Yes.
Correct. Okay.
Correct.
Because we do have two websites. We have greecomfort.com, which is really geared more to our single phase equipment, and then greecommercial.com is really geared more to our 3-phase equipment. So, but either way, you can still get to the documentation. So, so that same quick reference guide that Robert went over in the whole video there, you guys can get to it anytime yourselves, and I encourage you to go back and look at it. Jesus, do we have any questions that have come in?
Yeah, we actually do. We had Barry. He's wanting to know, is our heat recovery coming to single phase ever?
So, as far as I know right now, GREE has no intentions of building a single phase heat recovery unit. We have single phase heat pump, but not heat recovery. So the problem with that, from what I understand, is there's just not enough demand. They build it, but we wouldn't sell near enough of them to warrant all of the research and development and building of the equipment to actually make it worthwhile. So anyway, any other questions coming in?
No, so far that's all we got for the moment.
Well, I guess that's a testament that Robert did an amazing job.
Yep.
So, a couple other things to kind of keep in mind when it comes to commercial, as I said in there, I believe I said in that video. If not, I'll probably say it in the next part of the video. That just want to repeat the fact that, I've talked about this in the single phase trainings over and over again. The controls and stuff, the service tools, the wired controllers, 24-volt adapters, all that kind of stuff is the same thing in the MultiPRO line for single phase that we also use in 3-phase. Our service tool, which is the portable service tool, is a part number CE4224FC. I'll repeat that again. That's a CE4224FC. I've talked about that in other trainings before. That service tool is very versatile. You can plug that into a commercial VRF unit, or you can plug it into a single phase MultiPRO unit as well. The information that tool gives you is phenomenal. It will tell you pressures. It will tell you the speed of the compressor. It will tell you your inlet and outlet temperatures. Pretty much you can diagnose that whole system without ever putting a gauge on it. Matter of fact, the only thing you got to open the service panel up for is to plug up the tool. So I can't boast about that service tool any more than that. Other than one last thing is, if let's say you've got a system out there and you've got 10 indoor units. rather than run around the building and go to each control and turn that all 10 units on or off or whatever you're trying to do. You can drive the entire system from that service tool. So it's another huge advantage into getting into either single phase or commercial VRF equipment, because with that service tool, it just makes it so much easier to troubleshoot. That service tool is really no bigger than the phones you guys are carrying in your back pocket. So, anyway, Robert, anything you want to add to that?
So the good thing about that service tool is you can access it, the information from either the outdoor unit or the indoor unit.
Correct. Correct.
So if it's raining outside or something like that, you don't want to be outside, you can go inside the building and hook it up to one of the indoor units and still get the same information. So
being that I was from the field, I can tell you right now that that's huge, because when I was in the field, there was equipment that you could hook up service tools to, but you could only hook it up to the outdoor unit. And boy, I had to carry me some long cables because I wasn't going to stand out there in the rain to do it. I'd plug that cable in and find myself a little tuck-in spot inside the building somewhere where I could analyze the data and not get soaked. So being able to just plug up inside is absolutely huge. So
yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
All right, any more questions coming in?
No, not so far. Nope.
All right, guys. Hey, listen, we'll reach out to everybody again. Please, we want to get you involved in the question. If you've got questions about the equipment and stuff like that, please, hit that ask a question button and let's let you get your questions answered. Okay. One last thing before we go to the video. If you go to our website, if your current distributor that you're buying GREE product from does not offer commercial equipment, you can try another distributor. And if you go to our website and go into the located distributor by your zip code, it'll give you all the distributors nearest you. Okay. So that's another way to, maybe get your hands on commercial equipment if you're wanting to get into it. Also, but if you really like the distributor you're working with, and I encourage that, if you're happy with your relationship with them, express your interest to that distributor that you really would like to get into commercial equipment. So, all right, with that.
So real quick to add to that, Greg,
sure.
is under the contractor tab at the top is where you would go to find your local distributor. So at the top bar under the contractor, you could find a distributor that way.
Perfect. I appreciate you jumping in there, giving a little better, clearer description of where to get that information. And I've only done it myself a million times, but trying to remember exactly what you're clicking on. Heck, I can't even remember when the last time I filled my coffee cup. I know it's empty.
So we actually
Exactly.
have another question coming in.
All right, well, let's get it real quick.
Came in from Jared. He's asking, can this be installed in residential homes?
Well, here's the deal. The answer is yes, because I already know in California there's quite a few jobs that are very large homes, and I wish I had that kind of money, but I don't. I'm a poor technical guy, right? Anyway, that are using three-phase commercial equipment for residential applications. So unless your locality, coding says no, and the customer is willing to pay to get three-phase power put to their house, then I don't see any reason why you couldn't use three-phase equipment in a residential application. Same as some of the jobs I've been talking to some contractors out in California that they're doing exactly that. So there you go. All right, is that the last question? Hey, Jesus?
No, we actually had another one come in.
Cool, popping them in now.
All right, from Kobe, he's asking, can you go into more detail on the flow box for setting up existing air handler to a MultiPRO?
You must be talking about the mode box. Now remember, the mode box is only for heat recovery. It's not for heat pump installations. So that mode box does not apply to single phase equipment. It only applies to 3-phase equipment. And it's only if you're piping that as a heat recovery. Okay. We just kind of, in this broadcast, it's kind of, we only have so much time. So we just kind of gave you a brief overview of the mode boxes. If you want more information on the mode box, go to greecommercial.com, go under documents, and you will find the documentation about the mode boxes.
Right.
Anything you want to add to that, Robert?
No, that was perfect.
Yeah, I don't think we have enough time to get into detail specifically of how to pipe up one of these mode boxes. One thing I will tell you, and I believe we discussed it in the video, but I'll make sure I say it. Pay attention to clearances. You know, when you install that thing, you got to make sure that you're going to be able to get to the service panel and get to the boards and stuff that are in there. You need to be able to get access to piping and stuff like that. Because if you ever have to make a repair, you don't want that installed in such a way that you don't have room around it to be able to make repairs at a later date. And I only say that because I've got pictures of ones that are not serviceable because of the way installed. So please, don't forget about that. It's no different than the clearances you have to meet for outdoor units to be able to service them and stuff like that. Same thing applies to indoor units as well. You have to follow the clearances so that I don't want to say have to, you should follow the clearance recommendations so that you can service the unit in the future. So, all right, we're going to hold up on the questions. Let's go ahead and play the next round of video. And then we'll come back after that, guys, and we will be happy to answer any other questions that are coming in or existing questions that are in there now.
All right, into the mode boxes quickly.
So this is the only difference, these first 3 items on this page, from the standard MultiPRO that we've done before, is these 3 addition and then this one other Y connector for the mode boxes.
Now keep in mind, mode boxes are only when we're doing heat recovery. You don't need them for heat pump. Y branches, I've talked about them before, and the headers, again, you got to follow the rules. Y branches cannot be installed like this. They have to be level and flat. They can be vertical, they can be pointing down. You cannot turn them up like this. You can't have them like this. You can't have them like that. They have to be level, pointing up, or pointing down. Okay? Each one of these Y branches will come with the appropriate insulation. And you got to be smarter than the guy that's trying to show you how to do it. Hey, success!
There you go.
So that it's not hard to wrap around, and then you get your rest of your installation on it from there. So anyway.
So you notice Greg has 2 different sizes of Y connectors.
Yes.
One is for the gas and one is for the liquid.
And it's only one part number. That's something else to point out too. When you order that Y branch part number, you're going to get one for gas, one for liquid. You don't have to do separate orders.
And there are several different sizes, and the reason they're different sizes is for the downstream capacity.
That's the BTU capacity.
Yep.
It's much like sizing fuel lines, in my opinion, because when you're coming off of a meter and you're feeding line into a building, that first pipe's got to be able to handle the BTU capacity all the way down the line. Mm-hmm. And then once you come down and you branch off and you pick up some of those gas appliances, now your BTU capacity drops on the rest of the line. That's why your pipe can downsize until you branch off some more. Now you can downsize some more. It's the same thing has happened with the refrigerant.
Yep.
Okay, your main lines coming from the outdoor are going to be your biggest pipes. And as we get rid of some of that load, pipe sizes can change.
Correct.
So,
yep.
Bring the diagram back up, Robert. And you'll, right in there. So go from a Y branch to an indoor unit, talking about that piping right there, okay? In your smaller BTU sizes, be really careful. So when Robert shows you the selection software, you don't know your exact dimensions yet, okay? So you got to kind of have an idea how long those pipe lengths are going to be. So you have your preliminary selection software that you build, and then you come back with your as-builts, and you go back in and change what your piping actual sizes were so that you get the correct charge amount.
Correct.
Okay?
Yep.
But also, we need to be careful that if you said on the smaller BT units, and I'm talking like a 9K, a 12K, be really careful because you cannot exceed from a Y branch to that indoor unit 50 feet without having a pipe size change. So if you only allow yourself 50 feet in there, and then you come in, you go pipe that thing, and you use the size of the selection software told you to use, but you put 75 feet of pipe on there, you just boo-booed. Because you broke the rule.
Yep.
So if, like I said, sometimes some of those dimensions you got to know,
Yep.
right? So just be careful. So
The other thing on this diagram right here, I want to point out, you see that there's two lines. There's one that's a liquid and there's one for gas. So coming out of this right here, and this diagram right here indicates a heat pump application.
correct.
The bottom one that you see here is a 3-pipe, and it also has a mode exchanger in that particular illustration there.
Yep.
So keep in mind, again, that when we go into the selection software, unfortunately, the selection software is only going to show one line coming out of the system.
Correct.
So you got to visualize that when we actually do it, that if you're doing a heat pump, there is the return pipe coming, and if you're doing a heat recovery, there's 2 additional pipes.
Yeah, you got
that-
low gas and high pressure gas.
Correct.
Low pressure gas, high pressure gas.
and you don't see it.
We skipped over Cool Master, so let's go back to that for just a minute.
Sure.
So that Cool Master he's pointing on there, that's a special build that we had Cool Master do for us. They'll do up to 6 indoor units. It can be on multiple condensers,
Yep.
but you can't exceed 6 indoor units.
600 units.
Again, this is going to hook up just like you would do with central control. And in the Cool Master, now we can do 16 systems and up to 32 indoor units. And if you have a bigger job than that, you can do Cool Master Pro, 16 systems and up to 255 indoor units. I really like Cool Master's product. I've got the GMVC GA01 installed on my system at home with my 4 indoor units. You get full Wi-Fi control. Depending on whether or not you pay for the services, you can, it's per indoor head. They charge you per head. And we're not getting into pricing or anything like that today. But you can get full monitoring of the system as well. So what I'm telling you is the information you can pull off the service tool about temperatures and pressures and all that kind of stuff, you can read from your computer anywhere as long as you're tagged into the Cool Automation web link on your system or whatever system it is. You can see all that information.
So you can actually troubleshoot from your Lazy Boy.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
You
That
can
is awesome.
control it from your Lazy Boy.
Oh, man.
So when that customer didn't pay you, you just shut it down.
Oh, boy.
I didn't say that.
No. We'll edit that out.
The Cooling Hub and Cooling Plug, that is for mini splits, just an FYI.
It doesn't give you the software capability.
Correct. But it does allow you could pull it into all into one Cool Master and it all works and will allow you to tag in the backnet.
Correct. Yep.
So I'm not a controls guy, but it does do it. So, all right. I think that pretty much.
So again, this is available if you don't have it, that you can get it on our website under a commercial website. And as we do that later on, I will show you where you can download this form.
Right.
It is available now. So,
Yep. And it's on GREEcommercial.com,
Correct.
not GREEcomfort.com.
correct.
So,
We'll make sure we'll go over
We have
that
2
in a second.
websites, everybody, just so you know. We have GREEcommercial.com and we have GREEcomfort.com. So you want to be when you're looking for 3-phase stuff, you got to go to GREE Commercial.
Yep. The other thing too that we didn't mention, Greg, and I just saw that is our downflow kits. We do have downflow kits
Yes.
for the air handlers.
And we'd also have, when you, like if you're doing a change out or something, you already have a single circuit supply. That's what that adapter is for. That's the single circuit adapter for a heat kit. So in other words, like say you had 15 kilowatt heater kit, but you only got one supply circuit, that slides into the breaker so you can hook up that one supply circuit, like a 90 amp circuit. Okay. The MultiPRO centralized power kit, that kit will allow you to power like smaller indoor units with 15 amps, powering it from the outdoor unit.
Yeah.
So, and then lastly, we do have the filters available, MERV 13 filter boxes that can be installed on our ducted units.
Just make sure you adjust that static.
Yes, sir. So we want to go to the service manual.
So this applies to those situations where you're going to change that outdoor unit from a heat pump to a heat recovery, okay? And that is this switch here, which is switch number 5. And that's where we're going to change that dip switch to either on or off, okay?
Correct.
So for heat recovery mode, it's on, and for the heat pump, it is off.
In my opinion, these are one of those important checks. You need to make sure that machine is set up the way you need it to work, whether it be heat pump or heat recovery, knowing that that machine can do heat pump or heat recovery. It should be one of those off the checklist. Robert brought up a great idea, and so we have a quick start guide to the single phase MultiPRO. I think we're going to do another little quick start guide to heat pump, heat recovery checklist kind of thing to make sure, you know, we'll have the wiring diagrams and stuff and all the, you know, main things you need to make sure you covered in your install. So
in the
give us time, we'll get it built. So
the information that we're going to cover on all the dip switches, it's important to note that this has to be done with the power off to the outdoor unit.
Yep, I said that yesterday in yesterday's broadcast, about every broadcast I've ever done. Anytime you are changing dip switches, has to be done with the power off. The boards recognize dip switch change at power up. So, just a golden rule. If you just always follow that rule, no matter what you're working on, you don't have to worry about it.
Yep.
So, make sure you cover master slave.
So again, when you are dealing with twinned units, when you have two outdoor units and you're piping them together, you need to determine what is the master and what is the slave unit. So as an example, a combination of a 14-ton where you're using a 6 and an 8, you pipe them together and you go into the unit and you change the second unit to a slave.
Correct.
The first one is automatically set from the factory as the master, and what we're talking about here is dip switch setting SA8. And if you notice here at the bottom, that's where the configuration needs to be changed. Okay, so the first unit, and again, I believe you mentioned it, Greg, is when you are looking at the unit, right, and it's installed on a rail or however it is, the closest unit to the piping to the building is what you normally set as your master. So it doesn't make a difference if in this particular configuration, the 8-ton is here and the 6-ton is here and the 6-ton is closest to the building.
No, it doesn't matter if 6 tons closest to the building or 8 tons closest to the building. Whatever one's closest to your building piping, that's the one you make your master.
So you just got to remember that if you have more than one system, you follow that same arrangement to make it easier for you.
Right.
So again,
and then that comes back to what we talked about as far as if you're going to do central control or cool automation, when you're setting the dip switches, which I believe is SA2.
Yep.
Yep, it's right here. You move your little highlighter over there to SA2, your mouse. SA2 dip switches right there. Those are for the ones that I was talking about as far as central control. So once you have a master and a slave unit piped together, that becomes a system. And if you have another master and slave, that's another system. So you got system 1, system 2, system 3. these centralized controller dip switches, the master, as far as communication goes for central control, the very first unit in your sequence, you are not going to change those dip switches. That's going to be the master for communication, not master slave for units, master for central control or cool automation, okay? Then your second unit, you're going to change the dip switches at SA8 to make that unit number 2 or system number 2. Then on your third unit, it could be 1 unit or it could be a master slave. Again, you're only setting master, or if you only have 1 unit, it is the master of that unit, right? That one would be changed to unit number 3 and 4 and so on. And then you do that G1 and G2 wiring between those units only on the masters. You don't do G1, G2 wiring on the slaves. Only on the masters, you tie that wiring together. Then when you go and commission those units and address them, you will have no address conflicts. Central control, cool automation can pull all those addresses in. You won't get a C5.
Yep. So remember, we can have up to 16 systems. So those dip switches, more information on those dip switches and how to set them are included in the manual.
Correct. Again, I always refer everybody, go to the central controller instructions. It gives you the chart in there that tells you how to set all those, and it also gives you the wiring instructions for up to 16 outdoor units. Now it can be 16 outdoor systems. Once you have 2 units piped together, that's 1 unit. So I'm not going to get in depth with the piping or anything. So the top pipe is liquid, middle pipe is low pressure gas, bottom pipe is high pressure gas. This is something else I'm working with the factory to get corrected. So as you will see down here in them service valves, you got your 3 service valves, and then you have this valve down here. That's an extra valve. If you're familiar with heat pumps at all, a lot of heat pumps have what we call a permanent suction port. That's essentially what that is. So no matter what mode you're running in, heat mode, cool mode, doesn't matter, that's always going to be suction gas. And then your liquid will always be liquid, your low pressure gas will always be low side, and your high pressure gas will always be high pressure, okay? Things change when you go into doing this as a heat pump because you're not going to have 3 pipes. So here is a heat pump. But as you see, the pipes aren't marked. That's what I'm going to get. Well, they are now. Wow, they fixed them. Oh yeah, they did. They just call them liquid and gas though. They're not telling us whether it's high pressure gas, low pressure gas, that kind of thing. And the service valves down here aren't marked. So when you follow the piping through, and that's where I say it's a little bit confusing, this is actually, we're using liquid and high pressure gas. So the sequence there is not exactly the same. That's why it's so important. That's why we pointed out in the beginning in the owner's manual, that's the only place that it clearly tells you in a heat pump which 2 service valves you hook up to for heat pump only. And it doesn't matter heat recovery because you're doing all 3, other than you still need to make sure you're piping them correct to the mode box. You know, liquid's liquid, high pressure gas, low pressure gas is low pressure gas. But when you're running all 3 pipes, it's a little easier than when you're only going to use 2 of the 3. Yep. So it's very important. And like I said, I'm going to work with the factory to try to get these labeled a little bit better for you guys so you understand it. Okay? So anyway. So just an FYI, the piping sequence though, as far as the valves go here, they're not sequential to the way the pipes are in the unit. That's my point, okay? So be very careful that we connect to the right 2 pipes. So like I said, I don't want to get in depth in what we're doing today in refrigerant flow and all that for heat recovery versus heat pump. That's more on the technical side, more of a technical training. I don't feel like we have the time to do that today. So let's move into and see if there's any other questions.
Well, Greg is looking up questions real quick. I want to show you where you can download that quick reference guide for the commercial. So I am on the GREE commercial website. I go to the documents section, and this is the documents that it's going to automatically open up. And you'll notice that the very first document that populates is that quick reference guide. So here is where you're going to get that guide that we just displayed. You simply open up the PDF and there it is. You can download it, you can actually print it out, and you can have a copy of that quick reference guide.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, so just a couple more questions came in. Matt Toombs just made a comment in here. I always installed it like I would do if it was my own house, and I'm happy to hear that.
Yep.
Not everybody has that same view, and I'm telling you, it just doesn't take any longer to do it a nice, clean, neat job, and also make sure you're paying attention to clearances and stuff like that. Again, I've got pictures on my computer of jobs, and I've looked at recently two 8-port mode boxes in the circuit board side of that 8-port mode box, which has 4 circuit boards in it. No, 4 or 5. It's at least 4. Anyway, I can't think off the top of my head. But that one mode box is so close to the wall, it's only like 6 inches from the wall. I don't know how you're ever going to get in there to change a board if you needed to, or a sensor, or anything else. So, give yourself some room to get in there all the way around that mode box and be able to work on it in the future. And then they had them double stacked, and they were so close together you can't get into the mode box itself. So, that's why they show you in that piping diagram, you can't flip it upside down either.
Yeah.
So Troy just made a comment, just wanted to make sure I clarified it a little bit more. He said, can you clarify on the piping, the pipe showing level using factory default out the front? The down is exiting the unit bottom. And he's right. Mm-hmm. They're talking about, the illustrations don't show it as well. So when you're going down through the bottom of the unit. You're not coming out and then going down. That's what Troy was meaning.
Yep.
So these pipes are not coming out the front. So that's not coming towards you and then down. It is going straight through the cabinet. Yep. Down. That's what Troy wanted me to clarify a little bit more. So, Troy, I appreciate the comment. And I appreciate you telling me to clarify that a little bit better. So, again, I hope everybody enjoyed it, because it's just kind of a brief overview of, if you want to get into commercial, again, I think a lot of it, like I said, if you take the time to map it out properly and you make sure you installed it the way you mapped it out, and you take some of these little tidbits that we're talking about as far as setting it up, whether you're going to do, so that's another thing that I'll bring up. Whether you plan on doing cool automation or central control at the initial start of that project, maybe it's not in the plans at all. I would highly recommend you set it up that way.
Yep.
And have all your dip switches set and your daisy chain wiring from your G1 and G2 together. And then that way, when you commission those units, you don't have any addresses that are duplicating. And then that way, if that building manager or that owner or whatever decides a year from now that they want to add central control or cool automation into it, your job's going to be easy.
Yep.
Because all you're going to really do is run that last G1 and G2 wire inside. And the other comment I'll make to that is you don't have to leave that wiring in place. So you could do a temporary G1 and G2 wiring between your outdoor systems, commission the units, it sets all your address for your indoor units, you can take that wire back off. The addresses are set. Now when we come back, if we need to add cool automation, you add that daisy chain back, run your run inside to wherever your central control or your cool automation control is going to be, and leave it at that. The other suggestion I have is if you're going to use central control, I was just visited a job site with one of our distributors not that long ago, and they put the central control all the way down in the basement. And the property manager that was dealing with all these apartment units, that each apartment had its own, system, essentially tied back to heat recovery. But so when the system, and they didn't get it all set up right anyway, so they went back and So when you're addressing things, I guess what I'm saying is, not only do you want to go through and make sure you know which indoor units are what address, where is it at? So when you set up central control, you can go in there and you can name it. Like, this is front office, this is back office, this is the conference room, whatever labeling you want to put on it. so that you know each one of those units, when you go and set up that central control, you know what part of the building it's in, all the way through, right?
Yep.
So like, my point is, they put that in the basement. They have a property manager that has an office on the main floor, in the main room, and so she has to go all the way downstairs when a tenant calls to figure out which unit's down, when she could have that central control right there in her office and be able to go to the central control and say, okay, that's apartment number 15, and that's unit number this, so that when she calls the HVAC guy out, she knows immediately what system's down. And she may even be able to just periodically go check on it, and maybe they got an empty room. Maybe they got an empty apartment. They'll know whether or not system's functional or not, and they can go in there and do set points from there, right? So cool automation is the same way. When you set up cool automation, you can go in there and tell each part of the building what you want it to be.
Yep.
Like for example, with my little 4-ton single-phase unit on my house, mine is labeled the owner's suite, front bedroom, back bedroom, and living room. So when I pull it up on my phone and I'm changing temperature, I know exactly what room I'm messing with. And then the address doesn't mean anything to you anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
I hope you enjoyed that. I really feel like Robert did a great job explaining all that stuff and getting the information out about GREE Commercial. I think this is going to be good for us, for you guys to know where this information's at and be able to answer a lot of your own questions. But anyway, with that, let's jump into questions. Jesus, what's come in?
Yep. So we got a couple here. So it looks like Joseph, he was asking, when we use a header, I know 10-foot minimum is required from ODU to header. Is there any minimum length required to and from headers to each wall mount? Thank you.
Okay, so from a header or a Y to the indoor unit, even both on the single phase and the 3-phase, the rules don't really change too much. In other words, so your pipe size is going to be the same size as the head you're putting in. So let's say you're putting in a 9K wall mount. If you're putting in a 9,000 BTU wall mount, that's going to be a 1/4 3/8 pipe. The way the software works, when you're doing selection software, which is going to be part of our next broadcast, which would be part 2 of this, it will show you that if you go up to 49 feet, your pipe size stays the same size as the head. If you go over 49 feet, and nobody's going to, a foot's not going to make it or break it, okay? If you go 50 feet, I'd still follow the same pipe size. But above 50 feet, now your pipe size has got to change. Both the gas and the liquid pipe sizes will change in selection software to show that, because of the fact that you're going to that longer distance. That's where I've talked about it in single phase when I talk about selection software or job layout and stuff like that, or basic layout. Be really careful of that. If you can use a header and you can stay within the 49 feet, that's the most ideal situation. You want to try to centrally locate that header so that you stay within 49 feet to all of your indoor heads. And the reason for that is so that your pipe size doesn't change on smaller heads. Because on smaller heads, if you're using a header and you have to change pipe size, if you got to go up in pipe size, let's say you go from 1/4 3/8 to 3/8 half, okay? The unit still uses 1/4 3/8. So what you're going to do is you're going to have to run that 3/8 half pipe all the way to the indoor unit. Now you've got to reduce back down to the 1/4 3/8 to be able to connect it to the flares on the back of that unit. Okay? That's why I say it's better to set your header up to where you don't have to do that. Try to set the job up where you're not doing that. Some of the larger heads, so like if you have like a 2-ton air handler and you have wall mounts, the wall mounts are like say 6 to 9K. All 1/4 3/8 piping. So then what you would want to do is set your header closer to your smaller BTU units and have your air handler the furthest away from that header so that you follow that 49-foot rule for all of the smaller heads. And then that larger head, it's already 3/8, 5/8 piping to it, and that's not going to change because it's larger BTU already using the larger pipe sizes. So there's more than one way you can look at how you set up your header to make sure you're not having to go up in pipe size and then back down in pipe size. The last thing we want you doing is cutting the flares off of the units and brazing them in, using quick connects or anything like that. We want you to use the flares, and I know that seems to a lot of people object to that because they swear flares leak. I don't think they do. I think if they use the proper flaring tool and a flare gauge, and you're making your flares properly and you're following best practices, you can make sure those flares don't leak, especially if you're using a torque wrench and you torque that down to specification. All of the flares have a torque specification you're supposed to be torquing those nuts to. If you really don't want to do the flare that way, then you can use flare adapters. In other words, you can use they do make, Robert, I think you're familiar with these two, where it's like a quick connect type fitting, and then it's already got a flare made for you. So you're still doing a flare connection to the equipment, but you're not actually having to flare the pipe yourself. Okay. I just discourage you from cutting them flares off. The manufacturer does not want you to cut the flares off. They put flares on them. That's the way they want them connected. And if you do cut them off and you try to use a crimp type fitting or whatever type of fitting you're trying to use on that copper, or even brazing it, is another bad idea. Brazing it can be bad because you could overheat the pipe, and there's also strainers in there. You could actually damage the unit by brazing. You also have to flow nitrogen when you're brazing so that we don't clog up that strainer on that indoor unit. And then lastly, that's metric. The piping on there is metric. What you're using is standard measurement sizes. So the fittings you're going to use won't seal to the metric pipe properly. So you're setting yourself up for potentials of leaks, right? I know flares work. I know we've got jobs out there. Robert, I think you can attest to this too, that we've got over 100 indoor units that are all with flares, and none of them are leaking because they took the time and made the flares correctly and torqued them properly. Those flares don't leak, okay? They've been using flares well before VRF and mini split blew up in this country. We've been using flares for years and years and years. So I firmly believe that if you do flares properly, you won't have leaks. So, which also brings up something else I want to discuss real quick, is proper tools. When it comes to refrigerant piping, you guys, you got to get away from hand bending pipe. The systems of today are very, very flow. The refrigerant's got to flow properly, okay? And if you're hand bending pipe and you're getting ovaling to the pipe, that's not same as having a perfect 90-degree radius, keeping that diameter the same way. So what I'm telling you is use a good ratchet bender or a good quality bender that's going to give you that 90-degree bend or 45-degree bend without ovaling or kinking that pipe in any way, shape, or form. You may think that little kink in that pipe doesn't matter. It does. Especially when that heat pump is running in heating mode. That line is your discharge line if it's your gas pipe. And you start kinking that up a little bit. Little kink here, little kink there, you're going to cause that machine to run high head pressure. So I can't stress to you enough that take the time, buy the proper benders, make good quality bends. Which also brings up another question I think that was, or no, it was part of the same question. So if you go from header to, from a Y to Y, or from a mode box to a 90, you need to have a minimum of 2 feet between that mode box and that 90, or a minimum of 2 feet between Y to Y if you're using multiple Ys. Robert and I always joke about this. We tell everybody 3 feet because everybody thinks, you know, if you tell them 3 feet, maybe we'll get 2 feet, you know, because people don't like to get out rulers. So I'd rather you err on the side of caution is what I'm telling you. I'd rather you put 3 feet of pipe in between there instead of 2, just to make sure you've got flow before you hit those 90s. Okay. Robert, anything you want to add to that?
To reiterate, is what Greg was talking about earlier, is coming out of the Y connector, the Y branch, or the T-type header. If you're doing any 90 connection, it's got to be a long radius 90, and you got to have that minimum distance between the connection of the Y or the T-type. It is very important because remember, volume and velocity of the refrigerant equals capacity. And like Greg talked about earlier, if there's any kinks or bends in there, you're going to cause problems with the system in the future.
We've got to allow that refrigerant to flow freely. And it is done in lab situations and testings on having good quality 90 bends, using long radius elbows and not any piping being kinked or ovaled or anything like that. I can tell you, I have been supporting this type of equipment for a very long time now. I've been on job sites, even with mini splits, and a few little kinks in that pipe causes problems, even with a mini split. You cannot be kinking that pipe. And that's why I really discourage guys from using hand bending practices. You know, that's one thing that I think this industry has done really well with. And I think the contractors out there in the field today are spoiled compared to what it was when I was out there, because the tools have come a long ways, and they're not outrageously expensive either. Mm-hmm. So you can buy a good quality spring bender, or not spring bender, but a ratchet bender with reverse bend and everything for less than $250. That's cheap to me. The amount of time it saves you on the job when you can bend that pipe up like that and not have to braze in elbows and everything. Oh my God, it's a lifesaver. So I just can't stress enough. Get the proper tools, follow best practices, take pride in what you do. And this is something that was taught to me years ago when I first got in the field by my service manager. He goes, I don't care how long it takes you to do the job, but I want it done neat and I want it done right. Because if you do it neat and do it right, we won't be back. If I have to go back, it's costing us money.
Yep. And
I've held true to that my entire career. It doesn't take any longer to do a nice job than it does to slap it in and run. So I'm not trying to discredit anybody on this broadcast. I'm just reiterating the fact that, hey guys, you guys are professionals. Do professional work. That's my encouragement.
Yep.
Anyway, more questions?
Yep, definitely do. So we got John. He was asking, when I was using the MultiPRO GREE LCAC Selector Ultimate selection software recently, it appeared that both single-phase and three-phase outdoor units came up. Do we use this software for both residential and commercial systems?
Robert, I'm going to let you roll with that one.
So the newest software you can download from the GREE commercial website. It should be the 2.2 version. And in this version, it includes some of the newer models of indoor equipment that is available, like our dual fuel A coil and some of the newer models of the ceiling cassettes, the D models, and so on and so forth. So go to the GREE commercial website, and you'll see at the top there is a option for the selection software. You fill out those little 4 boxes there, and you will get an email sent to you where you download that particular program. The only caveat is unfortunately this software does not play well with a Apple or Mac. You have to have a Windows computer. And for those of you that your internal company has limited your administrative privileges, you may have to get your IT department involved in downloading the software. Unlike other brands out there, we do not charge you for this software. So you can download this software within your team and share the programs. And the great thing about this software, once you have it installed on your program, is we can share your design. So if you ever have a question about the layout, you can email us a copy of that. We can download it, and then we can review it and then send it back to you with any potential corrections.
Excellent. That was an excellent answer, Robert. Appreciate all that. So, all right. More questions.
Yep, we got Jay. He was asking, good afternoon, gentlemen. I have contractors asking what kind of connection they are supposed to be using on the Y fittings. He said, I'm sorry if I missed that.
So on the Y branches and the headers, those are braze connections. So, and on the MultiPRO single phase or MultiPRO commercial, you are going to be brazing on those pipes. And as long as you're flowing nitrogen, that shouldn't be an issue. What I discourage is cutting off any factory flare connections on indoor equipment and brazing the units in. You need to leave those flared connections on the indoor units. If you ever had to replace one of those units, that's become hugely beneficial to you because there is a pump down feature to these, or a refrigerant recycle feature, where you can pump all the refrigerant into the outdoor unit, close off the service valves, go in there, unhook that indoor unit, undo the flares, replace that indoor unit, connect your flares back up, and it's going to be way faster than any other way you would change that unit. So you're actually causing yourself a little more work if you ever had to replace one of those heads anyway. I'm not saying that we have a huge problem with indoor units, because we don't, but in that instance where you would have to replace one, it's not going to be that hard to do if you've left those factory flares on there. So, and in some of the units, you ain't cutting the flares off. The design of the unit's not going to let you. So,
Right.
You just gotta be good with flares, and it's not hard. We've done plenty of training videos about flaring. You can go out to YouTube and you can see it. Go to YouTube, go to GREEcomfort.com. I've done multiple different videos about doing proper flares, using the manual flaring tool, using a powered flaring tool. The most important part of all of that is a proper flare gauge and knowing how to use the flare gauge to make sure whatever tool you're using is making the flares properly. That extra couple minutes you spend per flare and you get a sealed tight connection is going to save you way more money than the time that you spent not checking your flares and ended up with leaks. So, okay. Any more questions?
So real quick,
looks like
Greg,
Yes, sir.
I was going to say, would you recommend using the existing flares on factory provided line sets or not factory provided line sets?
Absolutely
Would you
not. Cut them off. Cut them off. When you buy line sets that have flares on them already and flare nuts on them, cut those flares off. Take those flare nuts and use them for your fishing weights, and use the flares that come with the equipment, the flare nuts that come with the equipment. The reason why I say that is because the flare nuts that come with the equipment are beefier flare nuts than the ones that come on the line sets. So I would cut them off, reflare, use the flare nut that comes with the equipment.
And for those of you that we've done this all in the past, is once you cut off that flare and you practice the flare and you forgot to put the nut back on it, that's okay.
Happens to
That's
all.
okay. That's okay. Just cut it off again and you got more practice. There are contractors that I know that every morning before they go out to the job, they practice with a half a dozen to a dozen flares to make sure they get it right. And don't forget that little nut.
And you'll see in one of the videos that I've done before, if you're using the power flaring tools, once you get that tool set up, there's adjustments to those tools. You got to be careful of that. If you're flaring like 1/4 and 3/8, you're setting to the flare. I don't think you have to change. You're going to make good 1/4 and 3/8 flares. You check with the flare gauge and you're fine. But when you're going from like 1/4 and now all of a sudden you're going to flare 5/8, you're going to have to adjust that tool, because it is not going to take you from 1/4 making the flare perfect to 5/8 and making that flare perfect. It's minimal adjustment, but you still got to adjust it. And that's part of the reason why I say every flare you make, just throw it on the flare gauge. Make sure the flare was made right. If it's not right, then you need to adjust your tool and reflare it real quick and make sure that it's fitting that gauge the way it's supposed to. Then you've made your flare right. And then that's when you're going to flare it and you're going to realize that you forgot to put the nut on, but at least you had your tool set right this time.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
All right. Any more questions come in?
No, I think that's it as far as the questions go.
Excellent. Well, I think both of you guys did a great job answering those questions. And I think this was a very informative broadcast for the commercial equipment. I want everybody to know that this is a two-part series. So this is only the first part of the broadcast. So I want to make sure everybody is aware that March 20th, next Thursday, will be part 2 of the introduction to MultiPRO commercial. So, and what we're going to be doing there is selection software and job layout. So if you've never used our selection software, or even if you have, I encourage you to join next week, because Robert does an amazing job of explaining how to use selection software and the kind of nuances of knowing what to click on and what to do and how to change things around and all that. He just does an amazing job with it. So I think you'll enjoy that. And then on March 26th, we'll be back down in Atlanta, and we'll be giving you a live broadcast on Tech Talk. So we're going to be doing R32, multi-zone mini split troubleshooting, and part replacement procedures. So with the R32 equipment coming around here, I think we think it's important that the equipment's changed around a little bit. Daniel and I have done trainings down there before about board replacements and stuff like that. So what we're going to do is yank out some of the R32 equipment and tear them apart and put things back together and just see how it all goes. So I think that should be a good broadcast as well. And then the very next day, we'll be doing MultiPRO single phase again, and we're going to talk about the service manual. So I think that'll be another good broadcast as well. So got a lot of good trainings coming up, and I'm encouraging everybody to join. Robert, Jesus, you got anything to add before we sign off here?
The only thing that I wanted to add is don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at greecomfort.com to get notified of when the new videos are released. I'll try and say that fast a couple of times.
Yep.
Awesome. So one last thing I want to shout out about too is our next Talking Comfort Live will be on April 2nd. It's the first Wednesday of every month. I think we have a lot of fun on those broadcasts and talking about product and getting a lot of people involved in questions and stuff like that. I think it's another good thing to join into. If you've never joined a Talking Comfort Live, we encourage you to join. If you have joined before, we encourage you to join again. So that'll be on April 2nd. And I think with that, with GREE, we're by your side.
By your side.